A very good evening and welcome to this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mwangu Shampagi. And tonight, an election, some people have called it an upset, others have called it a landslide victory for Patrick Amuriat Poa as new president of the Forum for Democratic Change, the third president for the party in its 12 years. We'll be discussing the FDC elections and that major victory against Major General Mugisha Muntu, who's been a one-term president in the Forum for Democratic Change. We'll also be discussing a new book on the stands. Is that what they call it? A new book on the stands. Uganda Today, Crisis and Hope for Rebirth. Now, it's not many times that you have a book arriving in times like this, talking about events that are happening the here and now in book form. We have had a few. We live in dangerous and deadly times. The times are dangerous not because we are in the midst of war or tottering on the brink of starvation, but because we are at that point in time where tyranny has married blackmail and given birth to unbridled corruption. As Zach Niringia soberly and eloquently argues, Uganda today is in crisis. That crisis has numerous facets. The pillage of our natural resources by local and foreign masqueraders claiming to be investors, the destruction of our institutions that have been laid to waste by an imperial presidency which has both insatiable ambition and unquenchable greed, and the terror of our security forces who have shifted from protecting the nation to upholding the vile desires of a single individual. But most importantly, we're in crisis because too few of us dare to speak up. Too few dare to tell the truth, tell truth to power. Too few are willing to call a spade, preferring instead to talk of big spoons. This is the foreword, and it's written by J. Oloka Onyango of Makerere University for the book Uganda Today, which will be part of our discussion this evening. Let me introduce the team that I have in studio tonight, starting with Onapito Ekomoloit, Corporate and Legal Affairs Director at Nile Breweries AB InBev. Ona, very nice to have you.
Yes, thank you, Charles. Last week I missed the show.
Last week you missed because on Thursday I had seen you on the spot discussing, I think, developments in Zimbabwe. Yeah. But very good to have you back. Thank you. And since that discussion, a lot more changes have happened in Zimbabwe. There's a new president in Zimbabwe called Emmanuel Mnangagwa. Emerson, not Emmanuel. We have the author of Uganda Today, Crisis and Hope for Rebirth, Bishop Dr. Zach Niringia. He's also written another book, The Church in the World, a historical ecclesiological study of the Church of Uganda with particular reference to post-independence Uganda 1962 to 1992, which is a very interesting book. I have a chance to read it through. But we'll discuss Uganda today for this evening. The man himself, Poa, Patrick Amuriat, President-elect of the Forum for Democratic Change. Very nice to have you. Bishop, very nice to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very nice to have you. Yeah. Paul, very nice to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Charles, for bringing me to the show. Good evening to you viewers, wherever you are.
And of course, my colleague, Ivan Okuda, who is a lawyer and journalist working with the Daily Monitor. Ivan, always nice to have you here.
And a very good evening to our beloved viewers.
I did make a visit earlier today to visit to the Red Pepper editors. The Red Pepper remains cordoned. For a full week they haven't published, and 8 of their senior managers and editors remain incarcerated in Nalufenya. People have been asking, those a few who knew about the trip were asking, Nalufenya? What does it look like? How is it like? It's a normal police place, and the people running it are fairly decent people. At least the people that I met are quite decent people.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, I am.
We are going to go around the whole of Nalufenya?
No, I'm speaking to those I interacted with and the access I was given, and those editors are in good health, they're in good spirits, and for the first time in a security facility, especially one that detains people, together with the prisoners were served a cup of milk tea. So, maybe.
Might have been just because you're a journalist. And
congratulations, Poa, on your victory. How does it feel? You're the president of the biggest opposition party today in the country.
Thank you very much, Charles. whereas the victory seems to belong to me, it's actually a victory for the entire membership of the FDC. And I say this mindful of the fact that the party that I belong to and will be leading soon has exhibited a high level of internal democracy. Unprecedented, I think, even within living history of Uganda, and certainly challenging what goes on in the NRM, where in the NRM it is a one-man show.
Why is it a benchmark in the first place?
Well, that is one bad example in Uganda, you see, where it looks like just one person, takes it all. It's a position that is ring-fenced and it has an owner. Really a bad example to democracy. And so, as FDC, we are a proud party because anybody within the membership can vie for any position, qualify to do that, and can get elected. And so, really, I think this victory is a victory for the party, and it gives me a really nice feeling that we can be able to change our leaders, change them in a process well-tailored, for our needs. And
you got 642 votes. Is that the number of your victory?
I think they are about, yes, about 642
yes.
votes out of a voter population of 1,200. And a turn-up of about...
Genomoto got about 540?
Yes, I think the difference was about 172 votes, which in such a small population is quite sizable, and takes an effort really to get.
The democratic credentials you are touting for the Forum for Democratic Change, do you say that because you are the victor? Because the discussions we've been hearing since you're declared winner, I mean from the time you're going into this election until the results were revealed, were announced, shows you are actually taking over a fractured party. The discussions, if you look at the number of votes, your 642 Genomonto's, that will put him about 400 and less than 500? Slightly less than 500? Yes. Less than 500. You are almost split in the middle.
Well, what one needs to understand about the FDC is that we have had our internal differences. And these have lasted 5 years, ever since the departure of our founding father from the leadership of the FDC. So this is nothing about, this election. What was manifested in the election is what we have been living through these 5 years. And so this is one thing that brings me to the leadership of the FDC, certainly one of the pillars.
But what does that say? That you are saying you have set a standard that your main opponents, the NRM, have not been able to live to, but you went through an election 5 years ago and have remained fractured 5 years later, and your victory doesn't show that you're in any process or in any way trying to heal, and that you're going actually to heal and put that party together. What we have been hearing since Friday, where the elections were held, is that there is a possibility that you might see a wave of what people have called moderates walk out of the FDC, where they can't walk out. 5 years ago when Muntu won that election, that's it, there was the side we are told you belong to, which is the defiance, or what some people have called the radical side of FDC, who decided not to withhold their cooperation with Genomonto. And you're having a political party that it doesn't seem to be trying to heal and come back together.
I think the outcome of this election speaks one thing, and that is individual members of the party and certainly the delegates conference have got their preferences. One would think, the style of General Muntu is better, and therefore they they cast their vote, he's performed well. The others would defer, and therefore, you know, they would vote Power, or vote Pia Mugisha, or vote Dan Malcolm, or
Dan
Masiko.
Masiko, yes.
Yes, you know, any of the four who were in the contest. What is important is FDC's ability, together with their leadership, to bring back
Will Power be able to bring back the FDC together?
Power is a seasoned politician. He is devoid of conflicts within the FDC. I've never been part of the conflicts there, and
until now, maybe someone might say.
Well, maybe, you know, somebody is just angry because I got elected, but that all will, you know, fizzle away, I believe, with time, and you know, we can skillfully bring the party together. We're also going to.
What do you say, Power, to the talk out there that actually, rather than be able to bring the party back together, you're staring at a split in the party?
No, we
that your presidency might be the first to preside over an open split in the party and a possible walkout.
You should understand that not everybody would wish the FDC well. Who knows? These could be prophets of doom. Who knows where they are coming from? It is my duty now, as president-elect, after assuming office, to take up those challenges. And I am going to face those challenges squarely. And I believe that within a matter of 6 months, we would have worked around those challenges, because it's very urgent that work needs to be done within the party.
Have you reached out so far to General Muntu and his supporters to tell them, we've lost this, you lost this election, I've won, but we still need to work together? Have you done that?
We have had a short time between now and the election on Friday, just 1 day in between. And it is within our program, not just merely to talk to them, but to invite them on a roundtable discussion so that we may be able, first of all, to identify where the problem is, what has caused injury to the other sides, and we'll see how to, you know, establish a working relationship within the party that will really bring all of us together as a one united party.
Okay, we'll come back to the FDC discussion later. I need to draw in. We'll continue with this discussion, but I need to draw in the other panelists tonight. Bishop Zak, let me come to you. You've just released a book, a new book, Uganda Today, Crisis and Hope for Rebirth. Watching what is going on both in the opposition and in the ruling party on the political stage, the book, on the face of it, looks like it speaks to what is going on. But you as the author, how does it really confront challenges like you're saying in the main opposition party and what is happening within the ruling national resistance movement?
What the book says, and what is very clear, is the unraveling of something that has been for quite a long time. But in many ways, we're really teetering towards the edge. And what you see in this country, what you see, the story of deception that has characterized the way in which politics is managed and run. The book speaks about the nature of that deception, superintended over by General Museveni and his team, the 10-point program that seemed to give promise. I use the 10-point program to simply show how on each of those really excellent statements of vision of where this country could go, you know, unveiled on the floor, you know, at the platform of Parliament, 1986. And very sadly, on each one of those, the evidence does show, it's overwhelming, that none of those things were meant to be. But on the contrary, it was seemed to be, and especially over the last 15 years, what seems to have clearly come to the fore is this wasn't what was intended to be. On the contrary, this was just a desire by one and a few to capture the state, or so to speak, entrench a personalized state. The book does make reference to the fact, and I wouldn't be the first one to say this, the neo-colonial state was never intended to work for the people of Uganda. Of course it wasn't. Post-independence leaders attempted, some to some extent, but very quickly lost the plot to be able to restore the state for the people. And truth be told, General Museveni has succeeded where many before him failed, to completely turn the state into a personal property. It's the personalization of the state. And therefore, this is a state that really doesn't serve the people, doesn't function. Now, the evidence is overwhelming. Where you look at the institutions of the state, of course, what are they? They are all institutions that serve the whims, the desires, the ambitions of one and very few. So that's the state. The country, we can say the same thing. It's a geographical expression. That has been said. Think about, therefore, the politics of this country have been playing around that. So you have a state that really kills its own people, and you have leaders who kill their own people. Not only
literally,
really, oh, absolutely literally. I mean, we can talk about the massacres in this country. You check all of them.
But Bishop,
wait a moment. Yes. We are a country of scars. The scars of Ruwero, the scars of Teso, the scars of Maracha, the scars of northern Uganda. And all these scars are directly traceable to the thuggery of leadership in this country. So yes, they kill, but also they kill opportunities. I mean, UPE, great promise, but UPE is a death trap in terms of opportunities. I mean, the doctors have told us very clearly, the health sector. So you have a killer state, you have killer leaders, and then thirdly, and that's the point I make, you actually have citizens that have completely surrendered. Absolutely, they are killed. They are told, you owe it to us, you know, you must thank us.
Yes. Let me just come in there. If you look at an election process like Poa has just talked about, the promise, because you're addressing here the promise, the crisis, the hope, and the opportunity for rebirth, as you put it. Do you see that, isn't this death, isn't this killing extending beyond beyond the realm of just the current leadership structure, especially the people in government, to institutions like the FDC? Do you see hope there? Do you see, like...
Oh, you see, this fraud, this fraud is total. So on the one hand, and I always say to my friends who introduce themselves as the opposition, and I said, opposition to what? You see, if you can only have an opposition if you have a party in power. If you have a party in power, then you really have an opposition. But you don't have a party in power. NRM is not really a political party. We all know that. It isn't a political party. The best person who would tell us this story is the Right Honorable Mama Mbabazi. So the facade, you know, there is no doubt NRM is a political organization, but belongs to who? To the members? Excuse me, that. Okay. So you have a facade. And then, once you begin to define yourself over and against, once your benchmark is this facade, this fraud, you therefore have problems. And so I look at FDC, DP, UPC, trying to really be parties in this environment. And then they are baptized opposition. And then they also stand up and say, we opposition. And I'm saying, wait a moment. So we've got to go back to the drawing board and simply say, this is not true. First of all, it's a lie. There is no party. And secondly, these parties can't function in an environment like this.
Bishop, I'll come back to you in a moment. Let me pick it up with Honor. One is, we could have done this show in Ateso. And would do very well because the majority of the panelists here speak the language quite fluently.
Maybe that's not bad. There have been too many panels in which you could conduct it in Runyango.
So the beauty is we can do it in any language in this country.
Or next time for that matter.
Definitely.
So for a change,
we the eaters are final eaten.
Honor, let me come to you.
Yeah, just
you see a victory by Poa.
Yes.
In what is described as Uganda's main opposition party. And if you pick from what Bishop is saying, opposition to what? You're struggling to play along and appear like you're an opposition party. So what kind of entity does power take over in light of the general political environment in which we're having this discussion?
Well, first, don't steal power thunder and don't steal our thunder, so to say. In fact, just to digress, if you went to Teso now, I mean, this is the best thing that ever happened to them. This, I think
the closest you have been to the presidency.
They had lost hope.
We have Nelson Ochege.
You know, in Teso, there's a standard saying that Ojala Kisikulepeka Kwap, which is say that leave the owners of the country. That's how resigned they have been for decades. So I think finally power proved that
do you
we are part of the owners. But that's by
do you
the
think
way.
power will deliver you to a presidency, a national presidency?
Well, my argument about president is a historic accident. So if it's happened, it will happen. You don't have to struggle.
Just
too
accidental
much.
and not
Yeah,
by
yeah.
plan. Power shouldn't be spending
No,
planning the midnight oil
No,
planning
just
and
concentrate
plotting how to.
on building the FDC. But
One thing at a time.
I think what happened in the FDC, the after effect of the election, is typical of the Ugandan mindset. And it's what has sustained Yoweri Museveni is in power. People just don't want to change. They don't want to upset the status quo. I think because power is really, for lack of a better word, a nobody until Saturday. That's why people are so surprised, and there's a lot of debate, which maybe is good for the FDC that they sort of get a new momentum. But it speaks to what the bishop is trying to say. The problem is not just within Yoweri Museveni. I think it's a societal problem in my view. We have a society that is still grappling with really a sense of what do we want, you know? What do we want? So a lot of areas in the country are having problems, even where the president is not involved. So I think sometimes it's not fair to narrow it to him. There are areas where clearly is not the main factor, but people still struggle to make the right decisions. So until the society really shapes to understand what it needs, I've always argued that even post-Museveni, we shall remain with a lot of these problems.
Ivan, I need to pick it up here. You are following the FDC elections closely. I don't know if you have had the opportunity to read through this book.
Yes.
Because it presents the opportunity to grapple with and to attempt to deal with what is the what some people have called the political crisis that Uganda faces today, and how does it get out. And if it extends, you see at what you look at what is happening beyond Uganda's borders. The story of Zimbabwe is a very apparent one now. People are looking at Zimbabwe and wondering, is this possible? You have a debate in your Ugandan parliament. You have a political party that, unlike after the previous election, when FDC was scoring victory after victory, especially in by-elections, it has not won a by-election in this current term. And you're wondering, what kind of party does power take over? How do you heal the fissures that have grown now into into real cracks? They're not just fissures. They're huge cracks that exist within the political party.
First, I must congratulate Mr. Patrick Amuriat for the victory, but more importantly, congratulate the Forum for Democratic Change for conducting an election that is close to a democratic process, less chaotic, and the loser having the modesty and courtesy to concede defeat. I think it's in our political terrain, not just in Uganda, across the African continent, a very rare trait. And for that, I think the FDC should be commended. If I were a delegate, I think I would have given my vote to General Mugisha Muntu 1, because I think he is a better option for the cohesion of the party. And I think he needed possibly more time to be able to build the issues that he claims to stand on and for. And more importantly, I thought his victory.
Democrats.
Yes, I thought his victory would be less polarizing, because that precisely is going to be the problem he's going to have to grapple with, a political party fractured. But also because you have the whole question of the place of Dr. Kizza Besigye in the future of the FDC and how that influences the leadership in Najanankumbi. You might notice the most commented on social media attempts to project Mr. Oboy as a proxy of Dr. Kizza Besigye. So to them, it's basically a return of the Grand Master, the return of the Grand Mullah, the way Jesus returned to Jerusalem in a grand way. If you listen to the music that was played when he was announced winner, it was, toka kwa barabara, Besigye ameingia. It was not power ameingia. So for me as a student of literature, that symbolic importance is quite eye-catching. But all the same, I think FDC has proven that it has the capacity to deal with internal contradictions. The election that involved Mr. Nandala Mafabia and General Mugisha was fairly more hostile and involved a petition, and then there was a commission of inquiry. There were allegations made about the likes of Ali Salas, but to the credit they were able to emerge out of that process. I hope they can be able to stick. But Charles, the question then is, so what next? Mr. Mama Mbabazi did write a letter on 13th June 2015 to President Museveni, the letter that basically announced he's leaving the party. And not leaving the party, but will be running for president and NRM party chairman position. And in that letter he highlights, I think for me, what are the questions that we should be answering. How do you transform the economy? How do you provide better healthcare, better education? How do you achieve human capital development as outlined in our National Development Plan and Vision 2040? How do we improve the quality of infrastructure, the quality of public service? How do we improve the quality of institutions of the state? How do we promote better governance and rule of law? And I think to the extent that those questions are not the basis of our political decisions, I think is a tragedy for our country. Because if you listen to the campaign, it's basically who comes next. And in fact, my reading of it, and I hope I am wrong, is the competition between Mr. Oboy and Mugisha Muntu really has so little to do with the future of FDC or the politics of FDC, but much more to do with the competition between mainly Dr. Kizza Besigye and now Mr. Mugisha Muntu, which is now emerging for what I call post-Museveni space. Assuming, God forbid, we walked out of this studio and the biggest story in town is that Mr. Museveni has dropped dead. There's huge crisis, both for the opposition and those in NRM. Who takes over? And that essentially means there is a competition even within the opposition for who occupies the post-Museveni space. So people are positioning themselves to be the most viable vehicle for that post-Museveni space. In NRM, those internal contradictions are alive, again, in respect to that post-Museveni space competition. If you remember the fights the Right Honorable Mama Mbabazi used to have with Speaker of Parliament Rebecca Kadaga, many of them playing out in the open. Even right now, the internal contradictions among top figures in the NRM are partly in respect to who answers the post-Museveni space. So reading this book and the issues that the good bishop raises, the question for especially young people, but even the old people, is what Mbabazi did ask during the campaigns. And I think that was the most powerful theme any campaign would have, a Uganda that works for everyone. How do we achieve a Uganda that works for everyone? And to what extent does the internal contradictions, the fights for power and supremacy in FDC contribute to that, to answering that question?
Just before I take a break, I want to come back to power for a moment. I need you to respond to this question that you are not your own man, that you represent a return of Dr. Kizza Besigye to Najanankumbi. I even just talked about it. I want you to give a quick response to that, and then we can discuss the details after a short break.
Well, that is a very interesting question. It's been asked over and over again, ever since I got into this campaign. But it needs to be stated clearly that what seems to be the misunderstanding in the public domain is created from what kind of strategies we believe in. I share a common strategy with Dr. Kizza Besigye as a solution to bringing an end to the dictatorship and through empowering the population. And so anybody would misunderstand me as being a proxy of Dr. Kizza Besigye. True to say, I am a student of Dr. Kizza Besigye's style of politics. And maybe this is why, you know, it's very difficult to separate me from the person of Dr. Kizza Besigye. But I made a conscious decision myself, and viewers need to know this, to run for the presidency, having noticed the kind of difficulties that the party was running into. Since the departure of Dr. Kizza Besigye, we have realized a nosedive within the progress of the party. And I thought it was necessary for somebody to come and try to save the situation.
Is that because Monto failed to provide the leadership that the party needed, or because the people who believe in what I have had in the party called the two tendencies failed to rally behind him and provide that other kind of direction, especially as top leaders of the party, to his strategy of structure building?
If you had the advantage of listening to my campaign, I highlighted 9 issues during the campaign. These are really long for this particular show to accommodate. But there are a lot of internal weaknesses within the administration that are noticeable. And incidentally, there was an outcry from the membership in the party. Say, look, we are on reverse gear. We are not progressing.
The party is in bed.
Yes, it's going to sleep. And yet we have got a dictatorship around. You know, that really needs to be tackled urgently.
Okay.
And we seem not to be moving in that direction.
Can I beg your indulgence? Can I beg your indulgence for a moment? Let's pick this up right where it is now after a very short break. We need to make some money, and then we can come back and have continue the discussion. We'll be right back. You're still watching The Fourth Estate. An election in the Forum for Democratic Change brings into leadership Patrick Amuriat, POA. He's a former member of parliament, for people who don't know him. You were in parliament for 15 years.
Yes,
is that correct?
Indeed, yes.
Yes. And we're also having a discussion. Uganda Today, Crisis and Hope for Rebirth. That's a new book written by Bishop Dr. Zach D. Niringie. Tying into this, the political question in this country. Where exactly is the country going, and where are we as a country? There are many comments coming in on my phone, Poa, to you. Someone is asking, what will be the role of Muntu? Does he have a place in your leadership of FDC? Another one is asking and saying, you'll have bigger questions tagged. It's not the word of the sub person who sent the SMS, but tagged as a proxy. Yes, he used the word proxy of Dr. Kizza Besigye, than Muntu has had to deal with, being called a mole within the FDC. How are you going to navigate some of these?
Well, I think the answer is going to be in my performance and what I make of the FDC at the end of the day. The proxy issue keeps coming up, as I said, basically because of the nature of our campaign. And viewers need to understand that immediately after 2016, when Mr. Museveni was announced winner, we disputed the results of that election. We have evidence to the effect that we actually won by 52.8%. We've not been allowed to present that evidence.
52.8%?
Yes. We've not been allowed to present that evidence to courts. Everyone in this country knows the circumstances that stopped us bringing that evidence to court. Dr. Kizza Besigye's arrest and incarceration, and after the lapse of the mandatory period, he's just released and allowed to go about his business. Mr. Museveni and his people knowing that he had no opportunity to go to court.
Why should anybody listening to you believe you're 52.8%. When you as a candidate were not able to secure a re-election into that parliament, your colleagues, Ali Salaso wasn't able to come back to parliament, you were beaten back in what was seen as an FDC backyard only in 2006 when a tsunami pushed out the NRM
Out of
Teso. By 2011, things were reversing. By 2016, you have 39 members of parliament today.
Circumstances are different.
Yes.
Completely different.
I mean, people are questioning if...
you might want to know that there were specific members of parliament in the last elections targeted. Honorable Wadri was targeted. Jack Sabiti, Ali Salaso, myself, Waflo Gutu. You know, many more were targeted, and they're out of parliament. It was deliberate for the government to go after us. But interestingly, yes, you might want to answer this question. Even after being allocated about 3.8 million votes, which constitute 38% of the vote, is it reflected in parliament? Do we have 38% of 450 or so? That is the size of parliament today. So these are not comparable.
That's a question you should answer.
You can't compare the two.
That's a question you should answer, because
so really,
some people will argue and say, you as FDC and the strategy you represent has chosen to focus on the presidency. So you have a presidential candidate, and the presidential candidate is the thing, that you have focused less on building a party with structures, a party that is rooted in the grassroots. And people wondering, out of the 9 issues you highlight as your strategy to lead the FDC party, how does that ground it to make sure that you have a reasonable share of representatives in parliament, you have a reasonable share in local government positions, you have a reasonable share in other elected positions?
Well, one pillar of my presidency is going to be to revitalize our structures. Take the party back to the grassroots, strengthen it, deeply root the party, so that we do not behave like water weed that is, when the wind blows, the water, it goes with it.
Are you going to do that if you're going at the same time to try and promote a strategy of having the FDC on the streets as the defiance?
And again, Charles, you go wrong, when you talk about having FDC on the streets. That is not the meaning of defiance. It isn't the meaning of non-violent struggle.
Yes.
There are so many ingredients that you can talk about when you are talking about non-violent struggle. And this is something that we are going to sit down and see how to go about it. But just to answer your question, having both overt and covert structures. We know that all the political parties, and Bishop does not want to talk about in opposition. We also don't believe we are in opposition, because we should actually be in government. All the parties today that are opposed to the NRM find themselves in a predicament. The NRM would always look out for their structures, their strong people, and they would go and poach. NRM are predators, and they use all sorts of tactics, all sorts of facilities to see that they reduce our strength. And as far as the structures are
Charles, don't make for believer this illusion of grassroots and structures. This is a presidential democracy for all intents and purposes. Not even NRM is truly based on structures and grassroots. It's based on the person of the president. So actually, if they concentrate on capturing the presidency, you will be shocked. Overnight, that parliament, people will just cross. That's what happens in all African democracies.
You're shaking your head.
That's what happens in African democracies. Whoever wins will control a parliament.
Yes.
You will see massive crossing of the floor. So the illusion of saying that if they control the grassroots, they can actually capture the president doesn't work.
Bishop, you're shaking your head.
The grassroots does not determine who becomes the president.
Which is really our challenge as a country, is built on a fraud. So I hear you discussing you lost elections, members of parliament lost, as though elections actually happen in this country. He talks about a presidential democracy. I mean, we've redefined what democracy is. What do you mean by a presidential democracy? Let's say it as it is. This is simply a military dictatorship. This is simply a military kleptocracy. It's a military that combines with stealing unbelievable. And the evidence is overwhelming.
I've had a new word, Bishop. Not kleptocracy. There's a word called kakistocracy.
Oh, correct. Please.
I don't know if it's a kakistocracy.
No, it's unbelievable. So as soon as you begin conversing, I mean, look, you know, President Museveni he says things as they are. And we forget. One day he says, he talked about the Constitution as a mere paper. Remember this? I mean,
don't we make a mistake?
Wait a moment.
You're an author, you're an academic, and you're a religious leader. Don't we make a mistake to focus the discussion entirely on President Museveni? Don't we have an opportunity now? FDC is a major political party in the country. It's gone through 3 elections to find a leader. Power, when he gets sworn in, I believe this week, will become, on Thursday, will become the third.
You know, I hear you completely.
Yes. Don't we need to actually focus on Power and his team and ask, what exactly are you doing to change what we have
let me come to it.
What needs to be done?
That's part of the deception. Leadership creates culture. Show me a secondary school, just as an example. A secondary school that has gone down here, has been performing poorly. Give them a good head teacher who is very clear, who is focused on discipline, work, teachers. Let me tell you, that head teacher will turn the school literally in 3-4 years. The performance will change.
Power is going to be the new head teacher of the Forum for Democratic Change.
Look, when you talk about the members of parliament, Wafula Ogutu, Patrick and others, targeted, all the state resources are available. I mean, again, General Museveni says things as they are. He once said, I own all the money. I own the military.
The oil.
I own the oil. I own. So I don't understand us. Let's face it as it is. So
but
listen,
Museveni,
let's talk about him.
Just hold it a moment.
Yes.
General Museveni
Yes.
is not going, unless the circumstances are extraordinary, like they have been in the last 2 weeks, or they were in the last week, for Robert Gabriel Mugabe in Zimbabwe. General Museveni is not going to sit on a table and say, hey, my brother Patrick, so you have been elected president of FDC.
If you give me
okay,
one moment,
here is how we have to share.
If you give me a moment,
I think that's the argument that Honor keeps making.
May I complete the argument?
Yes.
So the first thing is leadership creates culture. Leadership shapes how societies behave. I hear Honor say we have a societal problem. That is true, but it's created. It's cultured. It's cultured by leadership. My dear brother, 30 years in wielding political power, state power, is no mean achievement in terms of length of time and in changing how the society behaves. Consequently, what you have come to see is a society that is really being killed. Now, there is absolutely no doubt that you need a kind of leadership, all right? And that is where he, but not just him, because the notion that you need big men and big generals, that is part of our problem. Big men, big generals, they know how to shoot guns. I mean, you say President Museveni, again, very consistent. When there is a crisis, what does he do? Adorns military fatigues to remind you, I'm here, you know, AK-47, military dictatorship. So the point is, yes, let's talk about President Museveni. We must. he is the one who said Africa's problems, leaders who overstay. He has truly become one of the biggest problems. That's number one.
He's long amended that.
No, thank you.
I did put the question to
For the
him
amendment.
in 2005. I asked him how long is too long. He said, no, that's not.
And you know, he's a master of amendments. he constantly amends positions, including I will retire in 2006.
No, but
now
when people like
so
power,
let me complete this. Just 1 second.
Yes.
Let me complete this. So the first challenge we have is leadership. We have a massive leadership crisis. I call them leaders who kill. But the second crisis we have is that the leader who kills depends actually on the other levels of leadership, and therefore parliament, and therefore religious leaders, leaders of society who have accepted to subordinate themselves to this thuggery.
Or being coerced.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a sense in which indeed we have created General Museveni. There is a sense in which that is the case, especially those of us who are leaders of our societies. We're talking about religious leaders, cultural leaders, professional leaders, trade unions. The fact that you really have no vibrant trade union active in this country is tragic, you know, and so on and so forth. So it is true that the primary challenge is a leadership crisis. Begin with the highest forms of leadership, but at every level. And what needs to happen is to see leaders of the societies, leaders of communities, leaders of the Iteso, leaders of the Acholi, leaders of Buganda, leaders of the, leaders of communities, of their tribes of religions, rising up to stand firm.
I hear you, and I want to come to Ivan. If power represents a level of leadership, I don't know if the opposition, you want us against calling them the opposition. The opposition has also decided to subject itself to this as a layer under what you're talking about of leadership crisis. If Patrick Amuriat and his colleagues at FDC over the last 12 years keep struggling and telling us they want to change things, we need to put you to the test and ask, are you actually focusing in that direction? Are you focusing, like Ivan put it, on the position of being party president of the FDC? Are you focusing on building a party that is actually intent on not just vying for, but actually taking over power? And what do you do to achieve something like that?
Well, looking at the fabric of the FDC, we are a party that should really be in power today. But the circumstances haven't allowed us to take over power.
Two quick questions.
Why
are you not? And what are you going to do about it?
The environment is hostile. And so we need to rally the population to try to change this. Today we have a powerless population. Of course, it's different from what it used to be 10 years ago. If you may ask me, how people responded to situations 10 years ago, I will say to you, they responded with resignation. They resigned to their fate. They knew they could do nothing about it. Today, following the manner in which we have acted to different situations and appealed to the population, we have a population that is close to being empowered. Now, it is going to be our duty, it is going to be our duty, first of all, to work on the mindset of the population. Tell them, look, this is your country. You have got inherent rights. They are inalienable.
You are an engineer. Engineers don't talk about something close to being straight. You either have angle and level on the building, or you don't have it. So what is close to being empowered?
This is now politics, not engineering.
Normally
political engineering.
Political engineering, maybe.
The mechanics of politics.
A lot of gray areas in politics. In engineering, there is precision. 32.8 degrees is just that. It can't be 32 or 40. You see?
Yes,
So,
yes, and holding less than 30% of parliament, or less than 20% of parliament, is that?
And again, you know,
Yes.
this answer has already been given by Bishop Zach. Do we actually have credible elections conducted in this country? I want to say no.
Do we actually have
we do
serious,
not.
do we actually have serious political parties in this country?
In the last election, for example, we won. All the kind of cheating, notwithstanding, all the kind of manipulation, notwithstanding.
What did you do to overcome that cheating? And
what will you do?
It was overwhelming. It was overwhelming. Different from the previous elections, where somebody could tilt the balance of forces and
Honorable Amuriat, you agree with us and people watching us that these are sob stories.
No.
You're reading from the book of Lamentations.
No.
When do you move from Lamentations to saying, we have a plan, we have a strategy, we are demonstrating that plan, we demonstrated that plan in Nambole on Friday into Saturday morning, and we are going to go through with that plan in the next 3 years, in the next 1 year.
Look here, Charles. You know, we have not lost sight of 2016. Even if, you know, the people in Kampala want us to begin thinking about 2021.
Yeah, but 2016 is clearly in the rear view mirror.
Why are we going to walk into 2021 yet we know it's much the same that we expect? Is there anything that will improve? Tell me what will improve.
You and your party said exactly the same thing after the 2011 elections. You said we cannot talk about an election in 2016 without looking at the election in 2011.
This time they said no reforms, no election.
Yes.
And went
so
back to the
what
same election.
is it that you bring to the table that is going to be different?
You see, Charles,
Yes.
may I come in here?
Yes, Bishop.
You started this show with a report of a visit. The entire leadership, management of the Red Pepper is in jail.
Yes, they've annoyed quite a lot of people, though.
No, I am not. I'm not here in defense of them or anything. It's not long ago when the editors of the Monitor were in jail. It's not very long ago. It's not very long ago when radio stations were being closed. The point I'm simply making, we make a mistake too to have this discussion as though this is something for FDC to sort out. We have a crisis of the whole country. Journalists, this talk show, we can keep doing this. Soon, it will be very difficult to have these kinds of talk shows. As soon as President Museveni begins to realize these talk shows are getting a bit, you know. You saw what happened in Parliament? What did he do after that Parliament? What did he say? Remember? He was very clear. He thanked those who had managed the operation. Remember what happened in Kasese? What did he say? He not only promoted the man who commanded a massacre, and it was very open. Let me tell you, my friend, this is not FDC to solve. And you make a mistake, my dear brother Patrick, to think FDC is going to lead us to this promised land. FDC has a place to play. NRM has a place. Everyone has a... Listen, this country is risking its very, very survival as a country. To agree completely with Honorable Mama Mbabazi in the missive that he quotes, this country is not working for people. I mean, it is not working.
He's also an article in the East African, which is on the street, quoting from the International Crisis Group report, which says Uganda is teetering on the edge of crisis.
Absolutely. The country is not working for anybody.
But
except, the point I'm making is that, you see, when we've got to shift the discussion together and say, yes, FDC, the burden you've taken to hope that you are the one going to lead this country to this place, that too is to deceive us, because you won't by yourselves. You have a part to play. Religious leaders have a part to play. I mean, religious leaders have been very, very clear. This jikwate ko to jikwata ko, that discussion is not the right discussion to be had. We need to negotiate the future of this country. That entire discussion being ignored, and members of parliament are going all over.
Bishop, I want to that's the word, to negotiate.
Yes.
I think this is the point. Zimbabwe has just given a classic case where the military negotiated Mugabe out of power together with other forces, international and local. So if you think there's a problem in this country, I think the challenge for civil society, for the opposition as it is to try and negotiate.
With who?
With the president,
I
who
agree-
seems to be
I
the
agree.
center.
You're
of-
negotiating
just hold on.
on unequal terms.
The problem is,
I mean, what kind of
if
negotiation?
you
are
negotiate strictly about him getting out of power, about someone else getting into power, that is zero-sum game. You are not going to start.
No, somebody suffers
It
from
needs
the big
both
man
sides
syndrome.
must first of all identify what is the interest of Uganda. If there is a crisis, what are the elements of the crisis? Is it just, I don't agree that the crisis is about an individual. I believe the crisis is about the systems, about the institutions.
systems were
No,
created.
it's about the
Excuse me.
institutions.
Of course
Yes.
they were created.
So
They
can
didn't just drop
hold
from
on,
heaven.
Bishop. So can we put on the table what are the problems with the systems? What are the problems with the institutions?
But what are the problems
and
with the
who-
individual? What's wrong with you?
But that
Why
is
can't-
one
Why don't you
individual.
want to say it?
He's fine. That's one
He's been
individual.
here, man, for how many years?
It is fine. That's one individual. I believe that even if we take out the individual, this country did not start with Yoweri Museveni. It had
I
problems
agree.
before him.
Yeah.
Individuals were taken out in the name of Idi Amin, in the name of Idi Obote, and the problems persisted.
Idi Obote or
I mean,
Milton
Milton
Obote?
Obote. So even taking out Yoweri Museveni without identifying what are the problems is causing all the
I
institutions.
actually do. I actually do in this book.
Yeah,
but the
but-
point, let me just make this. I agree with you. The key, the point I'm making is not just negotiating. Negotiating and
That was year
dialogue.
one.
Yeah, I agree. Negotiating is only step one. There is dialogue. You're a businessman. You're in business.
Yeah.
What you suggest must be done by civil society. Look, the absence of the business sector in this dialogue, because businesses are going to collapse under the weight, and you know what's happening to the economy, under the weight of this terrible way in which we are being governed. So yes, there needs to be a political negotiation. I speak about that, but there needs to be a national dialogue, a comprehensive national dialogue, and I'm the first to say it, that is inclusive of all. All of us are stakeholders in
But
this.
my problem with,
Let-
with
let me
whatever
just-
dialogue
let me just ask a quick
or,
question to
or conference
Honor.
you have, if
Yes.
it's about power, which is the obsession you all have, if it's about power, it's the least of Uganda's problem.
I don't know where you would
understand
place
what you're talking
power, because there are people who believe in creating a country that works for everybody.
Yeah.
There are people who are talking about moving the country
But
from
the point
a
is,
precipice.
I want us, whoever
Yes.
believes we can create a
I
country
just
that
have
works.
two questions
How?
for you. Two questions for you before you take a break. Negotiate with who, by who, and about what? 3 questions.
I guess the bishop and both and FDC as well have clearly identified the problem. To them, is the person of Yoweri Museveni. So that is
No,
the
no, I think, no, Honor, you're not listening. Please, you
So,
don't say
negotiating
that.
about
Please read
Museveni
this book.
or
It
negotiating
does-
with Museveni?
It does acknowledge, there is absolutely no doubt. President Museveni, even in his own speech, admits he has become a problem for this country.
but that's what
He is
I'm
not
saying.
the only problem. He is not the only problem. But let's admit he is a problem.
Okay.
Excuse me. Once we've settled that, there are other problems, and I have been very clear. Leadership at other levels have let this country down. Because honestly, we've constantly, year in, year out, for the last 30 years, leaders have caved in. Leaders have been bought. People have
let
been
me put a
bought
quick question to
peanuts.
you. Honor hasn't given me an answer for the 3 questions I put to him. But
But
let
I
me
was
put a quick
trying
question
to
to you.
answer, but the bishop
Let
refused.
me put a quick question.
Because I was
No,
trying
you are
to
saying
conclude my
negotiate with the
point.
okay, negotiate with the NRM because they were in power and is
NRM is
supposedly
not in
the source of the custodian of the problems as we know them. So those who are outside must negotiate with it on how do we solve these problems. And they must also offer specific recommendations and solutions. And they
Is that
must
goodwill?
just hold on.
No, I
For
find
that
difficult
negotiation
with
to
that
happen.
because if you look at the NRM, I wonder where you'd start your negotiation from, because if amendment of Article 102B, 102B,
Yes.
the one of the Majesi bill,
Yes.
is anything to go by, if the cooking and preparation of that was in an ad hoc structure of the party called the NRM party caucus without the involvement of the mainstream structures of what should be a political party. I don't know where you begin with to negotiate with NRM as a party. Do you write a letter to Plot 10 Chadon Road expecting a reply? Do you send that letter to Plot 1 Nakasero or Plot 1 Entebbe? Do you send it to Parliament, to the caucus? Who do you send it to?
All their organs, save the National Conference, are supposedly supported. So you can't exclude any of them.
Let's take a commercial break. We'll pick this up in a moment. Welcome to this last segment of the fourth estate. Someone says, Isaac says, Charles, you have filled the studio with Iteso. 3 of the 5 are Iteso. I was with 2 at MOOC, that is Honor and Amuriat, now aka Poa. Say hi to them. Gentlemen, you're listening. Isaac says he was with you in school at Makerere.
Many years ago.
And he says, what is Poa's explanation of Angeline Osege just after declaration of his victory? And why is it that the FDC women politicians never supported you? Actually, people say members of parliament, you have no support within the FDC, within members of parliament among your team.
Let me help him answer that.
You want to help answer?
Well, Evan.
Because he's a politician, so he might. But politics is really a competition for opportunities. At the center of it all is self-interest, whether you're talking about Napoleon or Mandela or Garang or Museveni or Mino, but everybody. Number one, self-interest across history, across the world. If you look at the support structure of Mr. Mugisha Muntu, which has many more MPs than possibly Power had.
More MPs.
More MPs, yes. It's really about opportunities. If you've been made leader of opposition, which comes with the 2 billion budget, you have every justification to support the status quo to remain. And I hope Mr. Amuriat, when he takes over, does not throw out Winikiza in reward for those who supported him, as happened.
It's been an FDC disease.
Yes.
Who changes structures.
Only Professor Latugo possibly did 5 years.
For me, it's going to be about performance.
Yes,
Okay.
I hope
deliver.
that doesn't happen. If you've been made chief whip, if you've been given a committee of parliament, you have justification to support Mr. Mugisha Muntu because his interests coincide with your interests.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Someone says, Musa Ladu says, could you quickly answer this, Poa? What role exactly is the outgoing president of FDC going to play under your leadership?
Well, that's interesting. We are going to have to talk to him to see what he is willing really to do. But I am looking at introducing a council of elders. A council of elders that will play an advisory role to the president. And if he is positive about this, he will belong to the council of elders. This is where the other elders and founders will reside, and be part of the decision-making body of...
that's the strategy to bring...
You should consult Mugabe on elders.
Okay.
No,
Thank you.
I mean, that is the long and short of
Okay.
The response that I want to
Samanda Alawi is watching us online, I think from the United Kingdom, and he says, Poa should note that Dr. Kiza Bestie's team has failed General Muntu's efforts to move the party by opposing and voting against almost all his good plans. E.g., in November 2015, NEC opposed his idea of spending 3 billion by funding MP candidates on FDC ticket, which Muntu reasoned would help them to have a big number in parliament. Bestia team in NEC, led by Honorable Wafula and Ingrid, walked out and the idea died. Lastly, though it's Bestia's right to support a candidate of his choice, this was a political blunder that shown his animosity towards General Muntu. While I congratulate you, Bestia's support to Poa throws FDC in a black swan virus. What do you say to this gentleman?
Well, I have not been in NEC for a long time. Since I left, I wouldn't be in a position to comment about this. But I think we all need to be fair to Dr. Kiza Besigye. Dr. Kiza Besigye cut short his term. He served 2 years of his second term. Decided to leave the leadership of the FDC because he wanted to participate in the liberation of the country a different way, from outside the leadership of the FDC.
And people think this is the root of FDC's problem.
He thought, he was constrained as president. There are certain things that he needed to do. For example, interface with the other political groups effectively, and get to some level of understanding that he would not be able to do.
But you had these formations, you have had alliances going into almost every election. You have structures that would enable a party president to interface with other players.
That is just one reason.
Yes.
The other one is free more of his time. Rather than get tied up to the day-to-day running. And it's very rigorous, actually. Being at the helm of the leadership of a political party.
But what you
it's
say
not an easy task.
Rather than free up more of his time, he's actually tied the party. He tries to free himself and tie the party.
He's not held in anybody's hand. The party
but these are things coming out of your party. They're not coming
freely operating.
Okay.
I don't know whether empirical evidence can be given on this. Those are really wide allegations.
We'll put the questions to Dr. Besja when we have him here.
Yeah, I think it's better. Let's be fair to him. I think we'd rather not discuss
friend of the show, so I think he'll have opportunity to speak to this. Dr. Jude Kagoro, I believe he's in Germany or the United Kingdom, I don't know where he is. He says, will Mr. Power stand for president come 2021? What happens if Besja decides to run again? Will Power take on his mentor? I personally think FDC has buried itself. I am told most of FDC MPs don't support Power. Can you comment on that? And then to Bishop, he says, the good bishop is a bit dishonest and part of the bigger problem amongst African intellectuals who see no good in our systems and progress. He is freely abusing NRM, describing it as a dictatorship, calling himself all sorts of names. Isn't that in itself a sign of political progress? Can you give quick responses to this? To these issues?
Well, talking about the presidency of this country, I think we'll get there, cross the bridge once we get there. I believe in doing one thing at a time. I have been accorded the honor to run this party. In the constitution it's for 5 years, but I've decided deliberately to pledge to cut short my term. It's going to be 3 years, and then we go into another election. 2 reasons.
That's timing it to 2021?
2020, I will be stepping down as the president, and maybe, if I find it necessary, I will run for another term. Now, I'm doing this so as to harmonize our electoral calendar, so that we have one election, in an electoral cycle. Today we have 2 delegates conferences, one of which is just mainly to elect the president of the party. This is total waste in my view.
Okay.
So harmonize and then, save the much needed funds that can now be
Will you run against your mentor? If both of you are
like I said, it's too early to decide. And I think I will not speak for Dr. Kiza Besige.
But you can speak for yourself.
Whether he's interested in running
if
for
he
the
is
presidency.
Interested.
But as I said, for me, it is one thing at a time.
Okay.
The presidency of the FDC.
Is it true, as someone claimed here, that General Monto proposed to put 2 billion support presidential parliamentary candidates, and he was defeated in the national in your neck?
What I know is that non-sitting members of parliament were actually given nomination fee, and the statistics indicate that the FDC fielded over 300 members of parliament.
Parliamentary candidates.
And simple calculation will tell you that that is in the range of about 1 million. That money was released, all of it.
Okay.
So that, just to answer that question, gives me the sense that maybe that person is misinformed or is merely distorting information.
Bishop, there was a question to you.
Well, I'm really surprised. You see, that's how low our expectations have been. For a person of the caliber of Dr. Jude Kagoro to really suggest I should be grateful that I'm not being killed for being honest about what's happening, and therefore we should be clapping that this is being done. That's part of the tragedy. The level, what I describe in this book, the ethical moral crisis, the political moral crisis. But secondly, my dear brother, people have been killed. People have been killed. So, and institutions have been killed. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming. It's not mine. It's all over. just to go to the villages of
I'm
Kitgum, of Acholi, go to the villages of
I think you make the
Teso.
point, Bishop. I'm constrained for time,
Yeah.
by time, so I need to take a few more messages, and I can hear the phone is ringing. Someone here says Besigye had to work day and night for Amuriat's win, secure candidature for FDC flag bearer for presidency in 2021. With General Muntu going through, Besigye would have had it difficult to come back in 2021. This is Bernard Mpeirwe from Lubaga. He adds that now it's obvious that it will be Dr. Besigye running FDC in the background. Watch the space. And adds that ask Amuriat if he's ready to face a split in the party if General Muntu decides to form a party and move with half of FDC supporters. Would you give him a quick answer to that?
Well, I think the choice is really that of General Muntu. I hope he doesn't take that decision.
Not you as leader of the party to try and bring back everybody?
Yes, would like to really know, and I have spoken very positively about him. I respect General Muntu. I like him. We've got along quite well. Our only difference is the approach.
Okay.
And I still believe that he can be very useful in the FDC.
Okay, this is a
Who
message.
knows?
Yes.
He could even bounce back, really.
I'm afraid,
after 3 years.
I'm afraid for
from
time.
now.
This is a message from the Honorable Margaret Muhanga. She says, Honorable Amuriat is a daydreamer. Winning in Kampala and Wakiso with the big population is what gave them the 35%. Elsewhere, they are very thin on the ground. In Teso, during the 8th Parliament, only 3 MPs were NRM out of 30 plus. And now only 3 are FDC in Busoga. Yes, IFDC. In Busoga, there have been 3 FDC MPs. Now there is 1, and so on and so forth. They've lost ground at every front, and their perceived win is only in their dreams, not in reality. The longer they take to build structures and keep their defiance campaign of appealing to people's emotions and not their reason, they are doomed. And this and his threats of ousting Museveni before 2021 is another big dream. We've had political tsunamis, etc., and none has yielded results for them. Please rethink your strategy. I rest my case. And she adds, their national conference was as big as the NRM district conference. Just a handful of people. NRM NEC, the whole Nambole is full of over 10,000 delegates. What do you say to my
I think for me, I wanted to just give in my view in what Margaret Muhanga is saying. I think for the opposition as a whole, the challenge right now is that removing Yoweri Museveni, given what has happened in countries like Zimbabwe, like Angola, Ethiopia when Meles died, it's obvious that in these systems which are both military and political fused, that the succession of the leader is going to be heavily reliant on the actions of the ruling group. And I think Zimbabwe now tells the opposition here, and even Angola, will it have a role in that succession? How will it position itself to be able to work with those who will take a decision within the ruling establishment, either to be the ones entrusted to lead the new dispensation or to be in a coalition, whatever it is?
Okay.
Because I don't think change is going to come from the street the way we know it in the Arab world. I think it's going to come from within.
Well, part of what contributed in Zimbabwe was what you saw on the street.
But also the context important, Charles.
I'm afraid, gentlemen,
we will
take,
to Muhanga.
Yes, we'll just take. Pardon, you want to respond
Yes,
to Muhanga?
yes. I would be surprised if Honorable Muhanga didn't react that way, and I want to interest her to watch the replay of this show. I'm not sure whether she's been following the show and the arguments by all of us in the studio.
Okay.
I think that
the show will be replayed on Wednesday afternoon.
I think
and it's available. It's available online on YouTube. Okay.
I mean, and no, to appreciate that the FDC is not dreaming, and we know what happened in the previous elections.
Thank you. Gifty Nansana and Anthony Kagwa, thank you for sending the messages. I'm not able to read them now. Can I take 2 or 3 calls? Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, sir. Your name and where you're calling from?
This is St. Mike from Chotera.
Yes, Michael from Chotera, go ahead.
I really get flabbergasted when Power starts talking of Besigye stepping aside. You know, Besigye is suffering from their disease of being a historic of FDC, what? He thinks that is the only opposition, no other candidate is supposed to stand. He's trying to create an impression Museveni is creating in NRM. They are trying to organize the elections, but one place is saved and is in a course that it always be rested. He is stepping aside from being president of FDC because he exactly knows that in their constitution, that place is for this guy. I don't know why in the first place it was put there. If a president has been elected, let him stand for president.
Okay.
That is a place for this guy, I think, only.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Do we have another caller? Hello? 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 Hello?
What the caller said about Besigye.
Hello? Hello? Yes,
Hello?
I can. Yes, yes, sir. Your name and where you're coming from?
This is Agaba from Naguru.
The name again?
Agaba from Naguru.
Agaba from Naguru. Go ahead. Keep your question or comment brief, please. Agaba, we can hear you. Go ahead. Agaba, are you there? I think we lost Agaba. Can we pick another caller? Hello? Hello?
Agaba, can hear you.
Hello?
Yes,
Yes, sir. Your name and where you're calling from?
Javian from Hoima.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah.
Sir, you're listening to yourself. Can you turn down the volume on your TV set? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, sir. Your name and where you're calling from?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
This is Ankton calling from Soba.
Yes, Aston. Keep your question or comment, please.
One of the writers in the French Revolution, Rousseau Jacques, said the Bourbon monarch had forgotten nothing and learned nothing. Now, when I hear Mr. Amuriat still talking about 2016, I get a little bit turned off. Because when we look at it, the reason why the FDC has been failing for a very long time is because even though they have a lot of supporters, I believe the opposition in Uganda has more supporters than the movement. But majority of the people that support the opposition don't vote. But the reason they don't vote is not blamed on the voters. It's blamed on the leaders. The leaders keep on saying that Museveni stole their votes and Museveni is still available. And some of the time they claim they're not even going to stand because the vote will be stolen. Now, can you imagine, should I go and stand in the line and vote for somebody whose vote is going to be stolen and he will do nothing? Unless if that person tells me that he has agreed with the thief that this time the thief will not steal. Or he has told me about the new tactic he has brought around. They keep on repeating the same thing 4 times. They say we won and the vote was stolen. And they tell people, well, we are not even going to participate next time. When the next time comes, they come back and they say, but those people are going to steal. They are going to cheat us, but we are going. In fact, this vote is not so much about whether we are going to win, but just to show that the man is a thief. So you want me to stand on the line and wait from morning to evening for a vote which is going to be stolen? I believe that you need more organization. For Goliath to be beaten by David, even though David was weak, he stood up with courage and looked at Goliath and threw the stone, and everybody was cheering. And that's what you need. You need to mature in politics. And probably if you don't have the tactics anymore, you just get out of the flow and stop repeating the same thing again.
Thank you, Anthony. I think you make a very powerful point, but you'll have a response from the studio here. Let me pick just one more caller. Hello? 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 I don't know if there's someone online. We lost that one. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, sir?
A very good evening to you, Charles.
Good evening, sir.
First of all, I would like to congratulate my party president, Honorable Patrick Amuriat, and greetings to Comrade Bishop Zach Neringe. Now, I don't know why those NRM people are feeling, jealousy about the way how FDC conducts organized elections. I think it's just because for them, the NRM, they have not had a chance to conduct such an election where they would vote for a party leader. They've had one man standing tall for 30 or so years. So that's why they are feeling so much envy. Jealousy about how FDC we conduct ourselves. Now, lastly, you talked about something, whether President Kizza Besigye will return as FDC's flag bearer. In FDC, our constitution says the president is not automatically the flag bearer. So when it comes to 2021, should there be an election, the party President Amuriat and President Besigye, or even Mr. Mugisha Muntu, all of them will be in contention for who will stand as the flag bearer of FDC. But what I know, 2021, Mr. Museveni will not be on the ballot paper because his time is up. His time is up. Within 5 months from now, he will be gone. For God and my country, Nyombi Richard Biemaro.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if you're following the debate in the ongoing processes in Parliament to amend the Constitution and whether that actually automatically rules him out. I'm afraid we can't take more calls. I can hear there are people who want to comment or ask questions, but we can't take more calls because we need to end the show. We're closing in on midnight. Let me start with you. Let me start with you, Ivan. To respond, you had some issues you wanted to raise, and then we'll run around the table.
One, Mr. Napito talked about a negotiation with NRM and Mr. Museveni. First of all, the whole NRM thing, as the Bishop and Mr. Amuriat have ably put it, is a facade. It's inexistent and only a political expression. But you cannot negotiate with Mr. Museveni, who has a track record of being a consummate liar, as Mr. Bote described him. And if you look at the 1985 negotiations, the so-called Nairobi peace talks, which have been written about extensively by Bishop Chelangat, not Bishop, but Ambassador Chelangat, who was Foreign Affairs Minister of Kenya, and how Mr. Museveni kept switching positions and flying to Sweden. And it's just, to imagine that you can have any meaningful negotiation with such a person is far-fetched. But also, very quickly to the argument about Mr. Mugisha Muntu and how Dr. Besigye didn't give him a chance to run for president. I think the Muntu camp is giving way too many excuses. Mr. Mugisha Muntu came preaching party structures and was given 5 years. And Charles, you're an editor of a newspaper, and in the private sector, it's really about results. You go into a boardroom and you have to present results and account for your time. I think 5 years down the road, accountability for those party structures is wanting. But partly because of what the Bishop did point out, he's operating in an ecosystem called Uganda, in a context where you have a military dictatorship that will kill, and the president comes just thumping. This is one country where somebody gets shot at by the police, and the president comes just thumping and says, we're the masters of violence. Basically saying, go and kill more. So to imagine that you can build grassroots structures like Mr. Boy is saying, to me is quite an illusion.
Okay.
But also, just to conclude, it appears from so many countries, as Onapito was pointing out, in Africa, that change for especially regimes that have been powerful for more than 30 years tends to come more from within, or internal fissures from within the system, but also the role that opposition plays, which I think, as I started earlier on, the opposition is basically trying to position themselves for that post-Museveni space, and I hope they can. Yeah. Okay,
I'm afraid because we have really little time. Someone says, enjoying the show just like I do most Sundays, but I quite think it's very unfair reading feedback messages from your phone, because you realize week in, week out, you read messages from the same people. Is there something like a Facebook page or Twitter handle where majority of us could contribute and air our contributions? Thank you very much. That concern is very well taken. There is a Twitter handle for the Fourth Estate. There is a Facebook page for NTV. Please go there, and this discussion is supposed to continue beyond the studio. Mr. Patrick Amuriat. You listen to the comments? I need to summarize, because this will also be your parting shot.
Just to respond to what Ivan has said about grassroots structures and reconstructing the party, we are going to have a new arrangement under this new leadership, where we'll operate both overt and covert structures. The covert ones will not be, identified by the predator, by the dictatorship, and they will be basically for the role of action, our defiance action. That will be their responsibility. The overt ones will be responsible for the day-to-day running of the party, and whatever Museveni wants to do with them, we will see how to mitigate in different situations. My party member has talked about the dynamics within the FDC, and I agree with him entirely. I think many of the comments coming from the callers indicate that they really do not know how FDC operates. I would like to invite them to come to my office once I am there, and we'll be able to educate them. We're also going to reach out to common Ugandans to say to them what FDC espouses, and hopefully they will get to understand our mode of operation. Now, there is a question
of comment from Aston. You can't expect people to vote for you if you keep telling them that the vote will be stolen.
We went into the election of 2016 as a form of liberation struggle to advance defiance. And we achieved a lot in that election.
Okay.
Apart from winning the election itself, we empowered the population. The population before the election is completely different from the population that we have today. There is a lot of anger within the population, whether you like it or not.
Okay.
However much you love the NRM, you need to recognize that
I'm
have an angry population.
Your parting shot. Yes, just your parting shot.
Well, just to thank all the FDC delegates who came out in their numbers to Nambole to vote. I am happy that I'm greatly honored and really humbled by their vote and the level of confidence they have in me. And I wish to say that I will never betray this confidence. I will work to the best of my abilities to ensure that we put the FDC in the right place.
Thank you.
To the tracks.
Anthony is watching us from the United States and says, if the FDC election was free and fair, and I haven't heard of any information to the contrary, then anyone that claims to believe in democracy should accept and respect the results. Congratulations to Mr. Amuriat. Bishop, your parting shot.
No, my thesis is we have a political moral crisis. We've built, as the Holy Scriptures teach, on sand. We've built our arguments, counter-arguments, built structures on a facade, on a fraud. We've lived with this fraud for very many years. Unfortunately, it now is presented as though it's the truth. What we need today is moral courage, conviction that we need a country that works for all of us. We need institutions that work not for an individual, but that make businesses work, healthcare, education, in which people from the north, the east, the south, the west, Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, all people feel this is our Uganda, feel nobody should be able to say this is my oil, my army, my... That's the country we need to work for.
Thank you.
We need to be able to marshal moral courage.
Thank you.
And that's really the future. That's really the future. It's not elections, it's not bullets, it's not money. It's a cadre of leaders who lead our societies, who are able to say we not only are imagining a different future, we can make that future happen.
Thank you.
Because we have a future.
Thank you, Bishop. Just wondering if this book is already on the stands. Where is it?
It's available variously, as you know, because of what it does. You know, the style of the... Jude says this is a government that allows people to speak. you have seen what those who speak, what they do to them and their books. So yes, it is available. It's available very small versions, but it's also available on the net.
Okay.
I have a PDF version which is accessible for people to upload.
But you're selling this. The other one is for the one
no,
on
no,
base
it's
is
free. Actually, it's generally free. People can access this book because it's not my. It's not. I'm not wanting to make money.
And it's
a
self-published.
message. Yes, it's self-published. It's a message. It's in many ways. It's like an essay I have written to this country to be able to say this is the future that we must all work for.
You're also adopting the Amuriat style of overt and subterranean distribution methods.
No. I really. No, the book is here.
It's the only feasible way anyway.
Yeah,
but
the book is here.
Congratulations to Amuriat for winning the FDC presidency. Congratulations to you for putting out this because we need more of this to be able to have a good discussion.
Thank you.
Charles, I know you are pressed for time. My parting shot is really to build on the bishop's submission and say the moral courage he's talking about should inherently lead to a negotiation. This removal of age limit is a golden opportunity for President Museveni and his opponents to try and say where next for the country. I believe that they can be a meeting point, selfish interest notwithstanding.
Thank you.
But the digging in, that I know is both on the president's side and on the FDC side, will only lead to more chaos.
Okay.
I think Zimbabwe has given us a good example where even a hated Mugabe was eventually cheered because there was some kind of negotiation to give him immunity, give him some money, and life continued. But this idea of thinking that you can take out a person and he cannot be taken out can only lead to conflict.
Okay.
I don't know why people don't believe that you can negotiate with.
Thank you very much. And I will end the show with a message from Ongwenis Ksangala, who was asking, but really, where do you guys get this horror of propaganda, for example, that Ingrid and Waf opposed Muntu plan of spending 3 billion on MPs so as to boost numbers in Parliament? Now, where does this come from? Well, it came from a viewer who sent us the message. I only read the message.
I think it's distorted, actually.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Honor. Thank you very much, Bishop Zach. Thank you very much, Power. Thank you very much, Ivan.
Thank you,
thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much to you all, our viewers, for joining us tonight. And always, thank you very much to the production crew that delivers this show to you every evening. I mean every Sunday evening. And like I said earlier, the debate continues on our social media platforms. Just Google or log on to the NTV Facebook page, log on to the NTV Twitter handle, or log on to the WhatsApp group, and you can continue this discussion. But you can also watch a replay of this show on Wednesday afternoon. From me, it's a good night.